Morning, Ambassador.
The says now just by speaking for the policy.
A distinguished lecture series. Good morning, I'm Ritika Reddy, student at the Department of Public Policy, School of Social Sciences, Ramaiah University of Applied Science. Before we commence, a few things to keep in mind. The event is going live on our YouTube channel and is being recorded. Fellow learners, my earnest request is for you to maintain decorum for the next hour and a half. Please keep your phones on silent. It's my honor to welcome the ambassador, dignitaries, the faculty, and my fellow learners who are present on this wonderful morning. We have with us the director of Ramaiah Public Policy Center, Major General G.V. Prasad, Dr. Sindhuja, and Dr. Padmavati, Head of SES Education Unit, and Adjunct Faculty at the Department of Public Policy. Thank you for being with us. I would request you all to rise for the Ramaiah anthem.
Sakalan karyami harini chala vajitum. Jnana vidya vinaya bhushan Ramaiah samoha Jnana vidya vinaya bhushan Ramaiah samoha samstara Kanasina samrajyavidu Deepadalu pradheepadala velavu Shraddhaspadalu Adivina vedantadavasile Vigayana santamulavidu Pratyajana sopanavidu Amrita Janake Samadhana Kshetra Vidu Prati Bhaya Saratani Mahadu Surtiya Kendra Vidu Ajnana Sattare Jekumasastara Surya Shridu
Event right now, so distinguished lecture. It will be a platform to bring reservoirs of knowledge and curious learners together to enhance one's intellectual capacity. Today, this distinguished lecture will be the first of the series. Grateful and honored to be introducing the ambassador, D.P. Srivastava, currently a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation. He served as the Indian ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Czech Republic, Libya, and as India's High Commissioner to Malta. As Joint Secretariat, he participated in Indian lobbying efforts to contain the diplomatic fire of the Pokhran II nuclear test and prevent the internationalization of the J&K issue during the Kabul War. He dealt with the candidature for permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council, United Nations Peacekeeping, and Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. Today, he is here with us to give us his insights on India and India's priorities in the United Nations. Inviting Head of Department of Public Policy, School of Social Sciences, Dr. Chetan Singai, to deliver the opening address from Governor.
Thank you, Deepika. A very good morning to all of you, distinguished members. It's a pleasure to start the premier series of distinguished lectures that we have planned for the year and further with Ambassador Srivastava service his illustrious career, where he will share with us his insights. Because many of these insights that we are going to hear from him are more like insider speak. I think that is something that will be value add to the theoretical conceptual underpinnings that we study in classrooms, especially ranging from multidisciplinary perspectives in social sciences. So in this series of talks, we look forward to connect theory to practice. That's our main principle we are organizing this series, and also get what I say the multidisciplinary perspectives of the problems that are affecting us in the 21st century, ranging from terrorism to human rights, the contradictions that I can expect in policy making, to also apply various perspectives that we learn in sociology, economics, data sciences, analytics, and psychology to such issues. With this little opening remarks, without further ado, I will now request Deepika to take the proceedings further. Thank you.
Ambassador, you could take over the dance.
Sorry. Whichever you feel comfortable. Other.
Good morning, faculty members and the students. It's a privilege to be here in Ramaiah College, University, and your beautiful town. I had some association. My daughter went to law school. I dealt with United Nations for 8 years in history of external affairs, perhaps the longest foreign service at the headquarters. And this was the period in the 90s. Am I audible? This was in the period in the 90s when we had Kashmir, problems in Kashmir, on the ground. And Pakistan used the opportunity to float 4 resolutions in the United Nations, 2 in the General Assembly, and 2 in the UN Commission on Human Rights, and we managed to defeat all the 4. One of the attempts was the 50th UN CSR session in the Commission on Human Rights, which is now called Rights Council. CHR. Defeat, it was very good to her. And after the defeat, she went into seclusion for a week. Nawaz Sharif, who was then opposition leader, described it as the worst foreign policy disaster of Pakistan. I was also in part of the Indian delegation in the World Conference on Human Rights. And the other stream of subjects I dealt was terrorism and peacekeeping. At the end, by the end of my term, I was then joint secretary. I dealt with program to nuclear tests. I was also the Nobel officer for during Kargil War, and I went to International Court of Justice as member of the Indian legal team. So, because of the paucity of time, you can't, compress these very different situations in 40 minutes, 1 hour. So I'll just focus on some issues. I'll begin with UN Charter. This is a foundation document. I'll touch on Kashmir issue, which colored Indian perception of the United Nations. And I'll also cover Pokhran 2 nuclear tests, because some of the fallout, and we managed to contain the fallout from the United Nations, but the issues, the series of negotiations, right? Some of them are still and I'll end by also touching upon some of the sister concerns. What most people don't realize, that the United Nations, as it was conceived and it's part of the Charter, not only covers what is called United Nations, it also covers World Bank, IMF, and WTO. And these were called regional arrangements in Article 57. And the original conception was that they will be brought into a relationship with the United Nations. They are part of the United Nations family. And first port of call by World Bank President is on the UN Secretary General. And his salary is decided by UN. So who's the boss? Boss is the person who decides your salary. But the organizations will get taken away from the UN umbrella. Because the West relies early on that in the United Nations, the initial majority, when the charter was signed, there were 51 members. Most of them were from European family. There were just 4 African countries. Today, Africa has 51 members, the largest voting bloc in the UN. So, and today, United Nations strength is 193. It's a grown from 51 to 193. So, over the next decade, as the UN membership decolonization process expanded, India played a major role. The composition of the General Assembly kept changing. The West soon lost the majority in the General Assembly. And then they were trying to distance these other institutions. The IMF and World Bank, Bretton Woods institutions, and GATT is still part of the UN family, WTO. But because the UN, as the Charter says, works on the principle of sovereign equality. There are caveats to that, and they are built into the charter. Charter is a document of realpolitik. It is not an expression of idealism. And this was one of the fundamental mistakes India made in our starry-eyed idealism of the initial years. And now, by 70s, we had completed the full circle. And you reach Shimla Agreement, which talks about bilateralism. So, it's said, you start with India took the Kashmir issue, was taken to United Nations not by Pakistan, but third country. India took Kashmir issue. And by 71, Mrs. Gandhi, got it. It concluded 72 Shimla Agreement saying that, we favor bilateral approach. So there is a certain amount of disappointment or disillusionment. We could have avoided that if we had a more clear-eyed conception of what the UN Charter is. Now, I need to cover one more area, and that is League, because UN is an experiment in world governance. And it had a predecessor, which was the League of Nations. You can go further back, and you can talk about the Vienna conference and so on. But they were essentially conferences limited to European continent. League of Nations and United Nations have a much wider purview, particularly United Nations. I don't have time to go that back, so let me start with League of Nations Covenant. What is the main difference? The League of Nations, one striking point, which is sometimes forgotten, was that India was a member of the League of Nations. Now, India was not an independent country. So, what does that tell you? That the League Covenant was different from the UN Charter in a very basic assumption. The UN Charter is UN United Nations consists of sovereign independent countries. The League also included colonies. There are other major differences. Apart from the League was a much more limited membership and so on. The other major difference is there's much more concentration of power in the United Nations. Now, let me illustrate your point. League, like the United Nations, it had an assembly and it had a council. Now, the relationship was different. The General Assembly, the League Assembly, worked on the basis of consensus. Now, what is consensus? Consensus means that every member's view has to be taken into account. It gives a veto to every. It gave a veto to every member of the council of the League. It's not there in the UN. So in case of UN, that veto power, it's not there at all in the General Assembly. There is a two-tier structure, General Assembly and the Security Council. And within the Council, again, there is a two-tier structure, non-permanent and permanent. So the veto power was limited only to permanent members. So, unlike the League Covenant, United Nations from the beginning represented a much greater concentration of power in fewer hands. And this was not inadvertent, this was conscious design. Now, let me tell you about the UN Charter as somebody very elegantly described it. This is the Victor's Constitution. United Nations is the only universal body in the world. It's very different from multilateral organizations. There are a number of G20, for instance, of the presidency or SCO or NATO. These are all multilateral Group G7. But the United Nations enjoys unique legitimacy, which comes from the fact that this is the only universal organization in the world. But if it is an universal organization, it cannot have an enemy. Because everybody is a member, and member on the basis of sovereignty equality. Now, United Nations Charter has what is called the enemy state clauses. And there are two of them, and I'll just read out. One is Article 53(2). This says, I'll read it out, you can't see it. But the term enemy state, as used in paragraph 1 of this article, applies to any state which during the Second World War has been an enemy of any signatory of the present charter. So that tells you of the background of the charter and the United Nations. That this is, to begin with, it had its origins in the politics of the Second World War. And the victors decided to freeze their dominance in perpetuity by framing a charter in which they had a privileged position. Now, there is a second, this is also repeated in Article 107. Nothing in the present charter shall invalidate or preclude action in relation to any state which during the Second World War has been an enemy of any signatory to the present charter, taken or authorized as a result of that war by the governments having responsibility for such actions. So, the Allied powers can take any action against an enemy state. Now, with this beginning, now let me touch on the second aspect, which many of you as students or as laypersons, this is the human rights. Now, this is something which is much talked about, is there in media. Human rights have a very faint echo in the UN Charter. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a foundational document of the modern literature of human rights, was adopted in 1948. The same year, Kashmir issue was taken to United Nations by India in 1948. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This talks about human rights. It does not have right to self-determination, which is Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is, a more codified form of human rights literature. Now, this right to self-determination is actually mentioned in Article 1, 2, to develop. This gives the purposes and principles of the UN. Develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. Now, this qualifies, there's a difference to right to self-determination, but there's a caveat. Based on respect for the principle of equal rights. Now, if you read it in the context, it's equal rights of whom? Equal rights not of individuals but of member states. So it is qualified by the need to maintain equality among states. Now, there is also, in other words, right to self-determination is vested in state, not in the people. There's a huge difference. Now there's Article 55, which also mentions somewhere there's a reference to, this is the general reference to human rights. Universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. So these are two articles in this 108 article charter, which touch upon human rights and us or right of self-determination. Now there's a reason, especially right of self-determination, that is the most sensitive part of the human rights, as we know. The founding members of the UN Charter that included United Kingdom and France, and they had vast colonial possessions. In 1952, this is almost 7 years after the signing of the Charter in 1945. Queen Elizabeth's coronation took place. There were 70 Commonwealth countries represented in her coronation. Now, this was, some years after India's independence. So you can imagine that some years after 45. And in 45, how many colonial possessions United Kingdom had? Plus you have the France, and they were in no hurry to liquidate their colonial possessions. And the colonial rule was not based on respect for human rights or rights of the government, but on the foreign will of the people who govern. So there are 3 full chapters in this UN Charter to safeguard their interests. Interests of the colonial powers in maintaining the status quo. This is Chapter 11, Declaration regarding non-self-governing territories. Then there's Chapter 12, this is International Trusteeship System, and Chapter 13, Trusteeship Council. Now, Chapter 11, which is Declaration regarding non-self-governing territories. What is that? What are the non-self-governing territories? These are colonies. This is a polite form. They didn't want to mention colony in a charter which was dedicated to higher ideals, and the higher ideals are, so resonate in the handle of the charter, which is quoted again and again in various speeches and international literature. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow of that kind. Very beautiful prose, but the reality was slightly different. Now I have very limited time, so I will just refer to you. I have explained this, and many of you would be. Let me just touch. Okay. Many of you would be curious how, because of the debate on Kashmir issue, how this applies to right of self-determination, how this applies to the Kashmir issue. And let me clarify that the right of self-determination is not mentioned in any resolution on Kashmir issue adopted by UN Security Council. So when Pakistan talks about it, they are basically being careless with truth, to put it very mildly. There is a difference between plebiscite, which is a choice between 2 states, and it's a state's right. This is not individual's right. Individual exercises his vote, but the choice is between 2 states. And right to self-determination, which is a human right, which is a right of an individual, and which is wider. It's not simply joining state A or B, but it also includes the independence option. Now, as I explained at the beginning of my discussion, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted the same year, same time, nearly when the security Kashmir issue went to the UN, did not have right to self-determination. Now, I have explained this, I have written a book, Forgotten Kashmir, the other side of the line of control. This is published by HarperCollins, available on Amazon. I have treated the two issues separately. I have treated, the deciding issue in chapter 3 on Kashmir in the United Nations. This is the whole dynamics of how, the two sides, it's Indian position, Pakistani position. Now, in 48, even in 1950, the last resolution was adopted in 57. There was right to self-determination was not involved, and it was anchored in the debate on decolonization issue, where it has a very legitimate role. The enslaved people have a right to decide their destiny. Thereafter, there was an attempt to grow this thing further. And ICCPR was, sometime in 1966, it was finished, and I think ratification took place in 73 or something. Followed by declaration on friendly relations between states, which tried to balance, the ICCPR increased the scope of right to self-determination, and declaration on friendly relations tried to balance it with the rights of states. And then came World Conference on Human Rights, which again is a balance between the right of self-determination, which has expanded. And the scope of human rights has expanded. So World Conference on Human Rights has declared human rights. It's of all peoples. This is, it's not confined only to right of self-determination, not only confined to people of the, colonies. But there's a very strong caveat about this should not lead to dismemberment of whole or in part of territory of any member state. But the right has expanded. So to give a complete picture, at the end of the book, I have also devoted an entire chapter, Missions of the People, explaining the right of self-determination in the wider context as it has evolved today. And I have taken into account the contemporary situations, including Brexit, the Catalonia referendum in Spain, and Mosul referendum in Iran, and the reactions of those countries. To sum it up, and here I also, explain the politics of the UN Charter. So coming back to the UN Charter, when the Charter was being framed, United States, which was still in a very strong idealist phase, wanted, Soviet Union and China suggested a reference to independence. The chapter on non-self-governing territories, which gives the objectives. There's no reference to independence. So Soviet Union and China, this is, the Republic of China, suggested amendment to bring in a reference to independence. That, they are not self-governing now, but there has to be a progression in time. So they wanted this end objective to be mentioned. And this was opposed and dropped on the charter on the insistence of UK and France. There was the US. Now there are two sets of territories which are not independent. One I mentioned non-self-governing territory, which is chapter 11. Second were trust territories. And on that, there are two separate chapters, 12 and 13. What are trust territories? This was a loot. This was a loot of the Second World War. And this was continuation of the previous process. That is the First World War. The German colonies were taken away. And they were and Turkish, colonies or influence areas like current countries, Palestine. So they became mandated territories. After Second World War, that process was still continued and extended further. And this was part of, these were called trust territories, and there's a trusteeship council. So the present day leadership, membership of the UN includes a large number of these countries who were then under, they were trust territories, like India, for instance, or the whole range of, 14 odd Pacific states and so on. So there was an amendment floated by United States to have, some kind of governance system. This again was rejected by the two famous, of the charter. And I'll just read out one or two sentences as for the. In the case of trust territories, though there was a reference of progressive development or independence as a policy objective, there was no mechanism for UN oversight, leave alone enforcement. Britain and France managed to block a proposal for an on-site inquiry, as it would undermine their administrative powers. An American proposal for the UN to receive petitions and institute investigation was reviewed. Now, at the drop of a hat, there's a demand, there should be an inquiry and this and that, an international inquiry. And, there are human rights NGOs which are based in very sort of comfortable places and Western capitals, and they have come up with these demands. The compromise agreed upon was that the petitions would be examined in consultation with the administering powers. This was rendered meaningless as the trusteeship council structure was so devised that it had an equal number of administering and non-administering members. This resulted in a frequent tie, which under the rules of procedure led to an automatic election. So these were again consigned to limbo. Now, we covered the next part, and this is one of the reasons of failure of the League of Nations was that it had a very weak collective security mechanism. It was, if I remember correctly, Article 10. And it was made weaker because it was weak from the beginning because United States, which was even then the leading power of the world, never joined because of Senate's rejection. But it was made weaker over the time as there was, exodus of many of the league members. Now, to address this, President Roosevelt was very keen that this should be addressed. At the same time, he was a realist. He was an assistant secretary of Navy when President Wilson, this was the First World War, had come up with Wilson's principles, 14 principles. And Roosevelt thought they were, too starry-eyed, so he wanted to avoid that excess also. So President Roosevelt's insistence was that, United Nations should be given this task of collective security. UK was against it. Churchill wanted, this to be limited to the big boss. And so did the Soviet Union. And neither of them favored China. Now, China is an accidental member. I will touch upon this if you have time and interest. You may have heard this, it comes in paper from time to time. India was offered permanent membership. Most of them is based on, secondary sources. I discovered the original file. And I have written a letter, an article. Anyway, so I'll try and cover it. That article was published by Times of India, op-ed page, 19th May, I think 2019 or 20 or something. So Roosevelt was very clear that there should be a goal for United Nations for collective security. This is included in chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Chapter 7 gives the UN power to impose sanctions. This was again one of the weaknesses of the League, that there were no sanctions imposed on Japan and Italy when they violated the field problem. And these sanctions are, these provisions are very effective. They are proved effective. They have been repeatedly used. Sanctions against Iraq, sanctions against, Sudan and, various other countries. Sanctions against Iran. So that is given in Article 3940. Now that is effective. Then it goes on to something more ambitious. And this is, should Article 42, should the Security Council consider that measures provided in Article 41 would be inadequate or have proved to be inadequate, it may take such action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. Such actions may include demonstrations, blockade, or other operations by air, sea, or land forces by members of the United Nations. Now, this is talking about military action. And it mentions operations by air, sea, or land forces by members of the United Nations. Now, this is by armed forces of the member states. This is not armed forces of the United Nations. So this issue was debated whether the United Nations should have its own standing army. And there is a faint hint to that in Article 43, which established a military staff committee. But 43 and 44. 44 is about military staff. 45. This military staff committee was asked to prepare plans for contingencies that may arise. Now, military staff committee remains in existence. It consists of representatives of 5 permanent members. But this has not been followed any further by actually giving powers to the United Nations to raise a standing army. Now, that is one of the major weaknesses of the UN's actions. And incidentally, the UN was never conceived to, there are two views. There's a view that the United Nations has kept peace by avoiding any war between the big 5. That has happened not because of the United Nations, that has happened because of the nuclear deterrence or other reasons, not by the Charter. Because, it's a basic, flaw built into the Charter. Each of them have veto rights. If somebody wants to go and fight against either permanent member, or, it can block any preventive action by the United Nations. So it has kept peace amongst the big 5, not because anything built into the Charter or what United Nations can do or not do. But it has managed to keep peace at a very low cost, and it is very cost-effective solution for what is called, sometimes, I don't like that expression, bushfire wars. The ethnic conflict in Africa and so on. And there, UN is much more cost-effective solution, UN peacekeeping, than these heavily armed and forces with very sophisticated weapons like the US operation in Somalia. I'm familiar with it because after US failed, UN was made the fall guy and asked to take over the responsibility. And we were asked to step up and contribute, and we contributed it again. And so did other members. They were Dicky Pakistani skills. And I managed to get my troops out with my own casualties. That's a different story. So, collective security mechanism built into Chapter 7 of the UN Charter remains an unfinished story. And it remains an unfinished story by conscious design, not by inadvertent omission. You have to read it in the context of something else. And that something else is so you have to read it, chapter 7 in conjunction with chapter 8. And what is chapter 8? Chapter 8 deals with regional arrangements. Now, what is regional arrangement? This is again a euphemism. Regional arrangement is actually the military blocks. And military, because the permanent members or who have won the war, they did not want to foreclose their option. They wanted a collective security, but they didn't want to foreclose their option. So this is something which, this is the other book I have got, which recommend also Legitimacy of Power by Ambassador Philip Sinano, one of my colleagues and friends in graduate. And he got this out that Churchill, in fact, only wanted the regional arrangements. He didn't want, any collective security arrangement, which was insisted upon and brought in on the insistence of Roosevelt. But now let me complete. So regional arrangements, this is the built-in contradiction. It says nothing in the present charter precludes the existence of regional arrangements or agencies for dealing with such matters relating to maintenance of international peace and security as are appropriate for regional action. So it has sort of given them a veto. But there is a caveat. That is, it says that such no enforcement action shall be taken under regional arrangement or by regional agencies without the authorization of the Security Council. So it has allowed the military blocks which predated the United Nations to continue in existence. It has legitimized their role, but they can't take specific action without the approval of the Council. But this again is observed in its region. So the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan in 79. The US went into Iraq in 2002 without Security Council authorization. Now, these are the sins of the big boys. Europeans who actually, Europe is the father of modern diplomacy. They were smart people, and they went to Kosovo in 1999. This is before American adventure in Iraq. The EU's action in Kosovo was also without Security Council authorization. So this again is something which is observed sometimes, and it's also issued without any consequences for those who flout it. And this caveat is diluted that this requirement of having prior permission by Security Council for military action. It's not required if you're taking it against the enemy states. So that caveat remains. Now we come to some of the Indian experience. And Indian experience I mentioned. It began with the Kashmir issue, which we took to UN sometime on exact date is 1st January 1948. There are volumes written, and I don't want to go into those details. I don't want any partisan debate who was responsible or not responsible. But let me distill some of the facts. And the fact is that the UN never declared Pakistan as an aggressor state. UN Security Council adopted a resolution from April 1948, which asked Pakistan to withdraw its troops. Pakistan did not comply. Then the UN Commission on India-Pakistan, considered its call, came to the subcontinent. They adopted a resolution. This is August 48, and UNCIP resolution of August 48 had three parts. Part 1 was ceasefire, part 2 was withdrawal of forces, and part 3 was plebiscite. So plebiscite came at the end of the process. This withdrawal of forces was condition precedent for performance of plebiscite. And Pakistan has never performed its obligations. Now, there are withdrawal of forces. That provision, this is part 2. Now, this provision also had two parts. There were obligations prescribed for Pakistan, and there were obligations prescribed for India. Now, there's a huge difference. This is my book. This is that Forgotten Kashmir, and there is a here. It's a reference to this resolution. You can read it in chapter 3. Now, this says that government of Pakistan will, as the presence of troops of Pakistan in the territory of the state of Jammu and Kashmir constitutes a material change in the situation. The government of Pakistan agrees to withdraw its troops from that state. So not only asked for withdrawal of the troops, the resolution included a specific commitment by Pakistan to withdraw its troops. And that commitment extended to not only withdrawing its troops, but also withdrawing. The next part said, the government of Pakistan will use its best endeavor to secure withdrawal from the state of tribesmen of Pakistani nationals not normally resident therein, who have entered the state for the purpose of fighting. So it also extended to others who had entered the state for fighting. Now, 75 years later, Pakistan has not performed this obligation. Now, this is one aspect. And I think sometime in April 1954, Nehru said that after Pakistan joined the Western-led military bloc, the situation has changed and plebiscite is no longer possible. Now, this is something used by some of the critiques of Nehru, like A.G. apart from Pakistan, A.G. Nurani's thesis is that Nehru sense that winds are changing, so he will develop cold feet. Now, what I brought out in this book, and this is also there in an article which I wrote for Hindustan Times, why Pakistan rejected plebiscite. This was carried on, I think, sometime in August 5th, August 2021. That what I have brought out is something which nobody else has focused on. Plebiscite has been talked about endlessly, but there are only 3 formal proposals made. First proposal was made by Mountbatten, who visited Lahore on 2nd November 1947 for talks with Jinnah. By that time, Indian troops had moved in, the balance of power Kashmir had changed against Pakistan. So Mountbatten suggested to Jinnah plebiscite in the UN's auspices. Jinnah rejected it. Now, this is recorded not on Indian literature, I'm not quoting. This is Alan Campbell Johnson, Missionary Mountbatten. He was press attaché to Mountbatten. Now, on the second occasion, and why did Jinnah reject it? Because the tribal invasion was still going on. And the tribals, led by Pakistan Army officers, had raped, killed, and looted Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians without discrimination. So Jinnah knew that the vote will not go in Pakistan's favor. We turned it down. The second occasion arose. This was in 1950. Owen Dixon was appointed UN mediator, came to subcontinent, suggested regional plebiscite. Owen Dixon's logic was a single plebiscite across the entire state will leave pockets of minorities on either side of political divide. And this will lead to forced migration on a large scale, which was already happening in the subcontinent. To avoid it, he suggested regional plebiscite and he limited the scope only to the valley. Because he said that in other regions, given the composition of the population, it was clear which way they go. Valley was the point of contention because the Muslims were the 70% majority. But the main political force was aligned with India National Congress. Now, Pakistan should have jumped at it because the Pakistan, if you accept Pakistan's thesis that Muslims of Kashmir wanted to join Pakistan, their advantage was most pronounced in the valley where the composition of Muslims was highest. Pakistan turned it down. Owen Dixon has stated in his report to the UN, which is available on UN website, that India was willing to consider it. Pakistan turned it down on the ground that regional plebiscite was a departure from the principle of single plebiscite. On the same paragraph of his report, he has said, however, I'm given the impression that Pakistan is willing to accept a partition of the state, provided it got the value. So Pakistan was willing to make a departure from the principle of single plebiscite, provided it got the value and got the value without a vote. So single plebiscite was simply a ruse. It was a pretext. The third and the most thrilling episode comes on in 53, which is when Sheikh Abdullah was arrested, was sacked and arrested. So India is supposed to have lost the Abdullah card, which is, what Rani keeps talking. I have highest regards for him. I have met him, and we have worked together on some aspects of Kashmir issues. Pakistan proposed bilateral talks. Again, not a plebiscite, bilateral talks. Prime Minister Bogra came to Delhi. Nehru Bogra talks took place. Communique was issued. Communique wrote case to plebiscite. Bogra went back to Pakistan. 1st December 1953, he wrote a letter to Pandit Nehru, going back on the idea of plebiscite. And again, the same letter. No, he said that Pakistan cannot accept regional plebiscite because it's a departure from single plebiscite. And as I have explained to you earlier, that this was simply a pretext because Pakistan was willing to abandon the principle of single plebiscite, provided it got the value without a vote through partition. So now there's a third and most telling example after Abdullah was actually gone on the scene. Why Pakistan was rejecting it again and again and again? What was actually then and now its official position that is plebiscite and the US auspices? To look at that, you have to go into the internal situation. And in 1950 April, a month before Owen Dixon came to India, Pakistan arrested Sardar Ibrahim, the first president of UP. That began what is called Southern Revolt by his tribe, and it spread soon all over UP. They were the martial tribe. First, Punjab constabulary was deployed, and Pakistan Army was deployed. This operation has lasted almost a decade. In 1955, Muslim Conference, which was a league political organization, supported Pakistan and gave a memorandum to Pakistan Constituent Assembly complaining of great terrorization, mass detention. It has used the word concentration camps, rape and ill-treatment of women, and in a very graphic language. I don't want to go into that. Unnatural behavior with young boys. Again, very I don't want to go into those details. And it said mortar guns were used against civilians. Now, mortar is a heavy caliber gun. There have been unfortunate incidents of police firing or firing by security forces, but never heavy caliber guns. So Pakistan was using heavy caliber guns but in POK, and they were all Muslims. And it ended by saying, terrorized by this situation, 3,000 people from POK have gone over to the other side, which means to India. So that given these disturbed situations, Pakistan was not sure of the outcome of vote even in the territory under its illegal control. And this is the reason why it was rejected. Now, let me fast forward, and this is the permanent membership. This is something which in sometime around 1950 or 49-50, around that time, Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, who was a PR to the United Nations, she was approached and she was by US and she was invited to a dinner with powers that be in Washington. So the dinner, this was Truman administration. He was a Democrat, but the invitees included a very famous man, the US Secretary of State in Cold War, was the most famous name. Anyway, I'll have to.
Sure. Single.
They had Cold War.
Sure.
Anyway, so 1955, somebody quickly check 55, 56. I didn't have the time. Anyway, let me complete. This is a so obviously, even though he was a Republican, he was a most influential voice, and he later became US Secretary of State. So it was a bipartisan offer. And she was sounded if India could become the permanent member of the Security Council. I have spent 8 years of my life talking. This was an offer. Across the table, and Madam refused. Madam said that, and these papers have got from Nehru Memorial Library, they are will report to Mr. Nehru. She said that this offer will not be seen with any degree of favor walk in Delhi. And she rejected it out of hand without consultation with Delhi. And of course, the brother ratified it. Now, what one foster is. The most powerful voice of the 50s, and he was part of this democratic congratulations, what is wanted. And the papers which I discovered, this was a fight protect for me. I was talking about it, I suggested that file should be declassified if for the top secret file. I've written that I'm not going into the details. I mentioned this in that letter, in that article. Not going into the details of the file. I still don't want to go into the details, but let me clarify one thing. There is this controversy. Now the second occasion came, this was Bulgane's offer to Nehru in 54. No response. A year later he came and he said, what about my proposal, my office? So then relatedly some queries were sent by foreign secretary of the period to all P5 missions. They to some, get the sound there. Now there is an important part. See, there are people who say that if Soviet Union was offering a permanent membership, then Cold War it meant nothing. I've heard this view from former foreign secretaries, and they have been writing about it. I have been too disciplined not to dispute them. public. I should now, whatever years I've left. The crucial point was that the offer has also come from US again. And US was still willing to support India. So the two principal powers in the Cold War, that both were agreed on India's permanent membership, who could have stopped? He didn't accept it. And there's a reason I don't want to, I don't have, I don't want to go further into it. There's an article by Mr. Nurani again, and again, I would call it distortion of history. There's a very minor distortion. He says कि नहीं वो तो चाइना को हटा के होता कैसे होता? Now, China has shown no such functions. And with China, it was a weaker China. The stronger China has no such function. They only have hostility to India, which was not known at that time. But I'm not trying to, guess, use the benefit of hindsight. But again, there's a misquote here. It was not the 5th seat. We were being offered the 6th seat. So that also was not in it. This was a huge historical opportunity missed. Now, China, Communist China, People's Republic of China was brought into Security Council in 1972, 71, 1971. This was part of the deal, the opening to China, then this peace with honor. America wanted to get out of Vietnam. But the larger issue was America wanted to pit China against Soviet Union, create a rift in the communist bloc. So, bring in China, communist China as permanent member. China became permanent member, and the transition was made without using any of the charter provisions. Charter provision has very involved amendment procedures which are geared to frustrate any attempt to actually change, because it requires 2/3 majority of vote by general membership, plus the proletariat, and then the establishment, each member has a veto. So none of this was resorted by. It was repeatedly America tried to, there were countervailing pressures, that you are abandoning your old friends. So they tried to suggest that, both the China should be present. They also said that this should be considered an important matter. And under rules of procedure of the UN, important matters require 2/3 vote in the General Assembly. That also was defeated. And China was brought in. The first thing China did once he became member of the Security Council was to exercise veto on Bangladesh's admission to United Nations. Bangladesh was, India's, India made huge sacrifices to get that country the freedom. So this is the ground reality, and this is what the charter, and this is what we missed. Now, I was mentioning, there's and I'm not touched on any of my internal things at one point. But you can see between the first membership and the next membership, or non-permanent membership I'm talking about now, 2000, I think 1951 was our term ended, and the next one was 67 or something. 16 years gap. So there was a sort of, escape from reality, idealism or whatever you call it. So it was only after change here, 67, there was a different prime minister, 66, change, 60, 65, post, right? 67, you have to declare your membership before, so that process takes 2-3 years. Now let me come to the current, and this is the last part. This is program to nuclear test. I started on in 92. I was on secretary when this two nuclear tests took place. I should confess that as a joint secretary, I had no clue. I was much too junior. Must be known to Prime Minister and three other people. But I was involved in every aspect of the subsequent firefighting. And the success of Indian diplomatic effort is that the UN Security Council Resolution 1172 of 6 June 1998, there were no sanctions against us. And the whole exercise began with the proposal to have to sanction India. Pakistan was, still being shielded. Now, there's a huge run-up between the test, the short period of 2 3 weeks, but I think the most intensive diplomatic activity of pre-India. So the test took place, first test 11th May, second 13th May. And the first reaction was a statement of the Security Council. This was floated by Japan and Sweden, who were then members of the Security Council. This was followed by a second statement. Then there was, pressure within Pakistan, and Pakistan tested by the end of the month. Now in June, China took over as presidency of the Security Council. And this get to the fight. China took over as the presidency of the Security Council. Now, Security Council has a rotating presidency every month. And this was a misfortune, whatever you call it. So the terms certainly hard. And a meeting was called in Geneva by Madeline Albright, only of the security, 5 government members, to discuss the situation. What she was concerned with was that in previous December, on the issue of Iraq, there was a rift in the Security Council permanent members. And that rift and the failure of the Council to adopt resolution against Iraq or Saddam Hussein sort of supposed to have emboldened them and forced US to send the Armada fleet into the Gulf. So they didn't want to repeat that experience. So they wanted to test whether the solidarity of the P5 will hold on this question. So this meeting took place on 4th June in Geneva under the presidency of China. It resulted in a very strong state. I have spent 1 week I've slept in office because of the time zone difference. And that became the basis of Security Council resolution. Now, why I'm showing this was one occasion when we did not have support of any permanent member because India had challenged the security architecture of the world. So, and our old friends from China, I will not name the country, you can guess, still wanted to bring up Kashmir issue. So there was a reference, but this we managed to dilute with the help of Russians. They helped us on this. And there is no reference to the previous Security Council resolution or decide. So, and there was at some stage a suggestion made by another country to have sanctions. That also was wrong. So this gave us, we managed to foil US sanctions. This is different from the bilateral dynamics, which was not part of my mandate. Those bilateral sanctions remained against India. Now, because this is a success story, therefore it's forgotten. If it had gone wrong, there would have been, books written about it. Because it went right for us. And what is the importance of unilateral, multilateral sanctions? They are the most dangerous. Because this is what destroyed Iraq much before Saddam Hussein's fall. In the 90s, it completely crippled the economy. The difference is that in case of unilateral sanctions, you can go around it. Country A imposes sanctions, country B may not comply and still provide supplies. But UN sanctions under Chapter 7, and this is the strength of I said the sanctions part is very strong, collective security mechanism is weak. There is no sanctions convention, and this was a success, which is forgotten. There was a long history of, the negotiations and so on. Now, in closing, let me come back to where I started. I said that the UN family, the triumph as it was conceived, included also the Washington, the World Bank, and the WTO. They were later, very slowly, they were never actually brought in. They were supposed to be brought in relationship. This is what the charter reads. But the specific agreement was never signed. And the huge difference, and this is between UN and those organizations. World Bank and IMF work on the basis of your equity share as like a company. You float a company and your controller board. I served on Gale board for 3 years and India Ports Global for 6 years. This is a company which I have. The controller of India Port Global is anyway different thing. Your control depends on your equity share. So that is a principle of World Bank and IMF. In case of WGAT, there was something else. GATT adopted the principle of most favored nation treatment. This was the experience of the period in the 30s, where the competitive tariff wars led to recession. So it was decided to encourage free trade, and one of the basic principles agreed was most favored nation treatment, which apparently is even-handed, same treatment everyone. But as imposing equality amongst unequal actually accentuates inequality. Because, the developing countries still don't have that industrial capacity. They didn't have industrial capacity to stand competition from the industrialized West. Today, they don't have even the West has not have industrial capacity to stand competition with China. So imposing equality amongst unequal actually accentuates inequality. And this point was made very clearly by Indian ambassador to, I forget his name, to GATT in his first speech. This is all watered down a bit. And 40 years later, GATT was changed to WTO, and the element of real politics became stronger. And they also brought in, cross-sectoral linkages. So you can use national needs to impose sanctions. Not sanctions by WTO, but sanctions, the country can use its own market access, denies market access to somebody else. So these are unilateral sanctions supposedly under WTO's control. Now, of course, that is also paralyzed again because of trade wars. That is, America has not allowed appellate body jurisdiction to function. If you have time, I will just a couple of sentences. Climate change is something that attracts attention. We have in the Vivekananda International Foundation had appointed a task force, and our report has put on the website India's Energy Transition in a Carbon Constrained World. The task force was headed by Dr. Kapoor, former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. I was coordinator and written most of the report. Mathematical modeling was done by IIT Bombay. And just a couple of points. The net zero emissions. Well, the enthusiasm of the industrial countries for net zero emission is because it breaks a global problem into implementation and national levels. So they have escaped their obligation, which was inherent in the principle of special and differential responsibilities. They created the pollution problem by creating most of the emission. Now the remedy is everybody, takes care of, you take care of your own fever. And everyone has to be normal. So you reduce your emission to the level your sink or your absorption capacity can absorb. So the global problem has broken into individual implementation at individual level, allowing them to. They had already escaped. Kyoto Protocol was stamped in 2012, but this has legitimized it. Now the second part, that if you have to reach net zero, which we have accepted, which is the most cost-effective route. And one of the biggest fallacies today is renewable. Renewable has low emissions, no carbon, supposedly. Because the production of silicon wafers and also produces carbon. So there's a UN study which has brought out that over the entire project cycle, it's the nuclear which has the lowest emission. Now the second part about the cost, our study has brought out that by 2070, a renewable heavy approach will cost India $15.5 trillion. Nuclear heavy approach will cost us only $9.2 trillion. That is also a large figure, but 50% less than 15.5. Now, why the difference and why this strange this thing that nuclear power plant is much more expensive, 3 times more expensive than a 100 gigawatt, 1000 gigawatt nuclear power plant will cost 3 times more than 1000 gigawatt solar point. Not 3 times, but it will be much more expensive, 60,000-70,000 crores. Then solar will cost about, it used to cost around 5,500 or 600 crores. The reason is, then when the wind is not blowing and sun is not shining, you need balancing power. You can't afford interruption in the grid. So you have to create a standby facility which is operated on suboptimal level or not operated at all when the sun is shining or wind is blowing. So this redundancy adds to the cost, system's cost. And there's an MIT study of 2018 which says that as you move towards low emission, without infusion of nuclear, exclusive dependence on renewable will push up the cost to exorbitant level. And they conducted this study, they did 2 case studies, one in the US context, taking New England costs, and second for developing countries taking China's costs. And for China, for the developing countries, the cost advantage for nuclear is even greater because nuclear is cheaper in development. Now we have, I think Bombay's modeling has proved the same result for India. So this, I believe, in many senses, is a path-breaking study and it's available on our website. Some of you who have interest, I've tried to capture the essence and executive summary. It's a complicated subject, but I hope some of you. This is the last part. This is one part where it has to play a role as it's going into a direction where thank you. That's the problem of
Thank you, Ambassador, for your talk. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Sri Srivastava, head HR and Nigela, Popular Education Foundation Medical. I would also like to request Dr. Padmavati to give an insight and initiate a discussion on matter of hand and moderate the question and answer.
Thank you for such privilege. Sir, at the outset, I would like to thank you for this wonderful lecture. It's a delight to visit you. And within such a short time, you have given an overview of how gradation originated, how complex the roles were played by the countries, and how India's most contentious issues have been treated at the United Nations. Sir, going forward, you said a wonderful point here. The five countries, which also has a veto power, you said it very wonderfully. This very power structure has prevented war among these five countries. Well, we acknowledge that, but we also notice that it has prevented war among these countries, but unfortunately, these five countries have violated and intruded into the territories of other countries. The United Nations structure has actively failed to prevent this from happening. It looks like the very veto power gives power to the violators to, punish the victims. So, is there any way forward to restructure the United Nations now? Is there a possibility for restructuring, considering the powers and position of the decolonized countries, like countries like us, Brazil, and South Africa are now coming forward. And I'm sure in a couple of years, they would go ahead in development compared to other countries. So is there any alternate to the United Nations? Where India and other developing decolonized countries can take over and their sentiments are echoed in that special group organization. I'm sorry, my question is very big. I had to set a context for that.
There are two aspects of your question. One is whether we can, in some way, modify or amend veto powers within the present structure of the UN. And the second is whether we can have another forum where developing countries' voices are actually addressed. The first part is not possible because the UN Charter allows the P5 to block any such move. Unless there is an overwhelming, sentiment, and ultimately everything depends on political will, but they also bend to it. That can be expressed in General Assembly, but as of now, in current context, Ukraine war has brought back their ideological divide. So this is not the time where any major change in the United Nations can go. And the second part, that is where India and Brazil and so on, I won't encourage that time because you have an institution which is functioning. And you also need to have, powers that we, and instantly India is amongst the powers that we are not part of the structure, but it is realized that India has acquired the break, and that is why even the permanent members now, in fact, except China, all five or all other four have supported India's candidature. So we need to work within the framework of what is available. The other ideas have already been tried. You had non-line movement such a long period. Brazil, of course, never joined that also. So I think we have to be realistic what is possible.
So, we have to wait for a little more time to get the leadership program. I encourage students to ask questions.
My question is, there are many intellectuals around the world who question the functioning and the capacity and the efficiency of UN's decisions in the past. So one of the main examples is that during the 1961 Operation Vijay, annexation of Goa, UN opposed India, asked India to call a ceasefire. While we were annexing Goa, we were acquiring what was ours from Portugal. And yet it called the annexation of Goa as invasion of Goa. They called it from the Portugal's terms. And in turn, in the case of 1971 Indo-Pak War, it supported America, which was supporting a military coup, Pakistan, against a democratic country, in the war against a democratic country, which was India. So in both these cases, during the liberation of Bangladesh, and they called India interfering country during the liberation of Bangladesh, when the East Pakistan was suffering and wanted independence from Pakistan, the main Pakistan. And yet they called annexation of Goa as invasion of Goa.
This, a question instead of statement.
No, I'm asking for your views on this. So, what were the main political reasons of why you
The UN consists of member states, so it reflects the political undercurrents. There's a correction in case of 1961, though the West decides that Security Council resolution was vetoed by Russia, was by Soviet. But you are right that there was a huge glaring contradiction that in 71, when we were liberating Bangladesh from West Pakistan's tyranny, many of the countries who now espouse human rights and talk about fight against genocide, they were all playing against us. And it's not only those member states in those papers, like New York Times, they keep talking about whatever is happening in the developing countries. They were all actually supported their assertions.
Do you have any questions? Come to sitting. Yes, anyone have a question?
Sir, I have one question. This India is harping on the modification of the UNO structure. But as I feel from your reaction, it is a very impossible task, actually very difficult task. So how things go in the Indian perspective? As I read the newspapers, India is for the entire restructuring of the UNO. But then you say it is virtually impossible. Then how things may go in future? Any guess?
You have to influence the General Assembly. If there is an overwhelming consensus, as I was saying earlier, that will bend even the P5. But you have a bigger problem right now, and this problem will last for some time because the within the P5. But you have to keep at it, the war is not won in one day. United Nations was the result of 2 wars. We need to be realistic, and we have to, have build national strength. I think this is the most important message. That gets reflected whether or not permanent member of the Security Council. After all, Soviet Union was a permanent member of the Security Council and had disintegrated. And Communist China was not a permanent member; it was brought in as a permanent member. And Republic of China, which occupied the permanent seat, was booted out not only of the Security Council but the UN as such. So it's all a reflection of ultimately the national strength. And this is what you need to build up. The rest is, your dynamics that can be taken care of, but that also takes time.
I have a question about vetoing. Is there a right stance when it comes to it? Because yes, we can see that it's used as a weapon by the big boys, but then again, it is keeping the peace between them. Isn't that a priority?
Veto right is not keeping the peace between them.
It can stop people from.
How does veto keep the peace between America and Russia or America or China?
They can't.
So decision to go to war, they don't subject their decision to go to war to the UN's approval. Veto comes in only when you are going to UN to seek approval. Their stand is that we are the big five, so the reason why they have not gone to war is not because of the veto. Veto only gives legitimacy, it allows somebody else to criticize your action. But you can block by exercise of veto. For instance, in 2002, America could have exercised veto on the UN Security Council resolution, which called it occupying power in Iraq. But it accepted it. Veto has nothing to do with the decision to go to war and not to go to war by.
So I'll close this question and answer section with last question. So why is there a lot of focus on security and conflict studies in India rather than on peace studies?
So I think our optional stand is that we have to focus on development. Peace and security are the two sides of the same coin. So you cannot talk of peace when the security is embedded. Talking of peace when your security is under threat basically means surrender. So you have to frame the debate on different things. It's a choice between development and security, and even that is not really a choice, because no country wants to lose its independence. Development is a sought after goal and it's a must, but you can't do it at the expense of security.
Let's close the session with a short takeaways and key summaries that I wanted to say. So as I understood from the talk, diplomacy, dialogue, and lobbying as the backdoors are crucial at the critical times to make presence in the global forums in order to bring up global solutions. And the question of UN security reforms always is surfacing. So it's time to give this lecture a closure to deserves. I would like to call on Samira, a fellow cohort, to deliver the next facts.
Honorable Speaker, respected faculty, and my fellow friends. A vote of thanks is gratitude that is to be shown unbiasedly. I feel honored and privileged to have this opportunity to offer a vote of thanks on this momentous occasion of the Pragna's distinguished lecture series. I would like to thank Ambassador D P Srivastava for making time amidst his busy schedule and showing his august presence in rendering an insightful lecture. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank Dr. D. Subhachandra from National Institute of Advanced Studies, NIAS, and also Mr. Ankit Singh, a research scholar at NIAS, for coordinating between the institutions. I would also thank Dr. Padmavati, Head of CES, Major General Prasad, Head of Ramaiah Public Policy Center, Dr. Prashant Desai, Head of School of Law, and Dr. Sindhuja for gracing this occasion. I also thank Dr. Chetan Singai for his constant support and encouragement. I'm very much thankful to all our faculty and support staff members who always stand by us and motivate us. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. I thank the student coordinators for organizing and making this event a successful one. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated fellow learners and volunteers. Any event is not fruitful without an active and appreciating audience. People who attended here deserve a heartfelt thanks for joining us today and appreciating us. It is your constant presence that inspires us to work hard and do our best. If time is money, then today you have spent millions for us. Thank you and making this occasion a success. We indeed look forward for your constant support and presence throughout the program series. Thank you.
Thank you, Samira. Requesting Ranjini Tadik, a fellow cohort, to hand over the credit. Let us bring the event to a close with the national anthem. Please rise for the national anthem.